And if you haven't already posted a question when you registered, please go ahead and type a question in the question box, and I'm going to come back to you, and I'll take your question because I think it's important. I want to be able to answer any questions that you may have. I'm going to start off, though, scrolling down here to Angela. Angela, I'm going to unmute your microphone. Good morning, Angela. So, are you with me, Angela? Okay, well, when you get on here, just a second, go ahead and get yourself on your phone, and then I'm going to come back to your question because it's an important question to answer. So, next what we're going to do is go over to Christian. Good morning, Christian. How you doing?
Hello, Rick. I'm fine. Good to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you. So, what's your question?
Well, I'm an existing Thesis user, and I was intrigued to know what the differences were between Thesis and Genesis. Based on your presentation, I intend to stick with Thesis, but I do love the responsive theme capability that you highlighted that Genesis has automatically. I'm frustrated with Thesis because when I look at my website on something like an iPad, it just doesn't look how it's supposed to look. Now, you mentioned something about a Thesis responsive theme course in May. I'm interested to know more about that, Rick, and how particularly, are you intending to make it drop dead easy to create a responsive theme for existing Thesis websites?
Well, drop dead easy. Creating a child theme is a coding job. Right. So creating the child theme will require using HTML, CSS, and PHP. And so the class is going to, review all of the HTML, CSS, and PHP necessary in order to create a responsive child theme. But I'm not sure it would be fair to say that it's drop dead easy. In some respects, responsive design is very young. Right? It's probably not 2 years old, and there are a lot of competing ideas for how to accomplish a responsive site, and they all have their sort of pluses and minuses. My scheme for doing this will involve, the way in which the site becomes responsive is primarily through the use of CSS. So we'll use media queries, and we'll say, the media query essentially will say, when the screen size is this big, do this. And that's exactly the way Genesis works, and that's the way we'll be doing it with Thesis. And whether or not that's drop dead easy, it probably isn't. I'm describing that class as an intermediate class, and it's going to require acquiring programming skills for people. If you want the drop dead easy solution, go over and spend $35 on Themedi's reactive theme. You can buy it for $35, and you can use his theme to have a responsive Thesis site, and that probably is the closest you're going to get to drop dead easy in the near term. But we are teaching this intermediate class starting May 10th, and I hope to make it accessible to people who are not programmers by profession. I hope to make it accessible to ordinary people, but that it's going to be the kind of person who's going to do that is a person who really wants to learn how to do the code, even if they don't intend to do it for a living.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Rick. I think I'll tune into those sessions in May.
Sounds great. I look forward to seeing you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's try Angela back now. Good morning, Angela.
Good morning, Rick. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
Fine, thanks. Great class. All right. So you wanted me to ask my question. And I do have some sites open that might help listeners to fully grasp the question that I'm going to ask you if you want to make me a presenter for a minute or so.
Go ahead.
Okay. So my question was, I did use the Genesis theme. I was trying to develop a real estate site, and I was one of those people who, I just didn't have enough time to put the site together and still sell houses and run my business. So when I saw Genesis, I thought, well, that's a way for me to just apply what I know in Thesis and get the site up. And I did get the site up. And as I've told you before, personally, I prefer Thesis because in the long run, I just feel that it's more customizable. In the short run, I needed something just to have up, and that was operational. So then, once I got my Genesis theme up, I found some other sites that looked like they were customized. And so my question to you was, how do they do that? And I just heard you say that they are not, I think if I understood you correctly, you were saying that they're not customizable unless you go in and you do some, I think, hard coding. Did I understand that right?
Yes, you did understand that right. Agentpress has, a series of colors, right? So that's the first line of defense in terms of, customizing the appearance of Agentpress, is you can choose the color that you want to use. The real genius of Agentpress is that it is a very specialized theme specifically designed for real estate agents and to integrate the multiple listing service stuff into it, right? And so people can use their IDX account or whatever that's called and search for properties in their area and that kind of stuff without you having to come up with custom programming for that. And that's what its real genius is in that. However, if you're not happy with the 7 or 8 or 6 or 7 theme colors, there are a fairly limited number of things you can customize. Now, I'd be happy to talk about what kinds of customization you can do without hacking the code, because you could actually put a different background image in here. You can reorganize your header. These things are actually widget areas so that you can reconfigure your widget areas and that kind of stuff. And for that matter, the one plugin that I currently have in alpha stage as opposed to beta stage is my widget styles plugin. I am porting the widget styles plugin to Genesis to allow you to change the styles, colors, fonts, and that kind of stuff in widgets in Genesis. And it could be that the combination of sort of those kind of the basic things that are available to you in Agentpress, is enough to make Agentpress look significantly differently. But if it's not, if you have if you want it to be really different, you're just going to take your copy of Agentpress and you're going to start changing it, because that's the only choice then, is to get in there and change the theme itself, and you'll recognize that it may make sense for you to try and find a way to segregate all of your changes into something that can easily be ported to the next version of Agentpress. And I'd be even interested in talking about that, in a class, how to customize a theme while still being able to make it relatively easy to upgrade. But that's right now what you have to do is you just have to go into the Agentpress code and change it, if the range of customization that comes with it isn't enough for you.
Would you look at one site with me and tell me if you think that they've done that?
Sure.
It's NZ, N like Nancy, Z like zebra, waterfronthomes.co.nz. That's right.
Okay, and so you think this is an agency child theme?
Yes, I do.
And we can tell. No, it's not. It is Meadow Ridge is the name of the child theme here is Meadow Ridge. Now, maybe they took agency and renamed it to Meadow Ridge, but this is definitely not. Well, let's take a look at it in.
I can't remember how I found this one, but I was pretty sure it was.
Well, but you can tell simply by looking at its files whether it is or not. Style CSS, Meadow Ridge. It was done by this redletterstudios.com. Okay, so Meadow Ridge is a 2 or 3 column widget ready real estate child theme for the Genesis framework. So this it's definitely apparently based on Genesis, but it's also not the agency. It's also not the Agent Press CSS file. So let's see, what's it say? Yeah. So it's a child theme for Genesis, but it's not, and it might be a modification of Agent Press. It's kind of hard for me to say for absolute sure, but it's not, strictly speaking, an Agent Press site.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on, there's, other than sticking with the background colors that they have, there's no way for us to customize this like we do with Thesis when we go into the custom functions PHP file. There's no way for us to do that on the child theme or on the parent theme.
Well, you definitely,
not that I would want to do
you
that.
definitely don't want to do it on the parent theme. The parent theme is
Right.
Genesis. You don't want to make any changes to Genesis. Right. The only way for you to customize Agent Press is to actually go to its functions PHP file and start adding custom code.
Right.
And when the new version of Agents Press comes out and you go hit upgrade, if you haven't segregated that in a way that you can easily add it back into the new version, you will lose that customization.
Right. Well, and thanks for that clarification. And I did just want to say that I've done both now, and I still consider myself a beginner, and I'm sure you do too, and anybody that listens to me, but a beginner in Thesis. But when you start using Genesis and you're still a beginner, you really need somebody, unless you're going to sit there for a full week out of your life. It's so, with respect to the developers, there's just not a lot of support out there for it. And so I'm just thrilled that you're going to be offering these classes. But it does take some time to get to learn it.
Yeah.
For somebody to stay with it, I think it's part of the thesis. I really do, in some respects.
Well, I think one of the reasons why it feels harder is because they don't do a very good job of helping you sort of step by step figure out how to take their child theme and implement it. Mm-hmm. And that is something that I hope to improve. Right? That's a problem I hope to solve for them for a fee, and to help make that process easier, because one of the things about using Agent Press is that once you decide to use Agent Press, you know how big your images are, right? You don't have to figure out, okay, let's see, now how many columns do I want? Do I want 3 columns or 4? Okay, well, if I got 4 columns, how big does the image have to be? None of that. You don't have to do any of that stuff. That stuff is all automatically handled for you. You have a prescription to follow or a recipe to follow, and so your job then is simply to follow the recipe. And if you follow the recipe, you'll end up with a site that functions very well and that looks polished, even if it doesn't look custom. And nevertheless looks polished. Right. And that's not the case with Thesis. With Thesis, if you want to build a real estate agent site like this with Thesis, this is a ton of custom work. Sure. Right? There's no simple way to accomplish this in Thesis, whereas it is, relative to doing it in Thesis or relative to doing it anywhere else, it's very simple to set up Agent Press and have it function properly. And, I hope to make it simpler. Now, I will be delighted to help you work through customizing Agent Press so that it does, or so that it looks the way you want it to look. because I think it's an interesting challenge and it's something other people will benefit from. So.
Well, thank you, Rick.
Okay.
But it is. I've done both of them, and I think as a small business owner, maybe everybody feels that their little niche or niche is different. But if you have the time and you're not trying to run the business yourself, but maybe you have the luxury of time, I guess if we were voting, I'd vote for Thesis.
Well, and that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So. All right, that's it for today.
Okay. Well,
all right, thanks.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, let's see. Brian has a question. Brian Hallen, I'm unmuting your microphone. Good morning, Brian.
Oh, Rick, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Appreciate you taking my call.
You betcha.
Or, I guess you could see what my question is about my wife starting a blog.
Yeah.
And she actually started it and mapped it, and so now I made an add-on theme, or I mean an add-on domain to my website, and that's where she'll actually be hosting it. But it's not going to be real complicated. It's mainly going to be a blog, and then she'll probably be selling her services there as a speaker, and that's about it. Although she hopes to be getting a lot of comments on the blog, but other than that, it's fairly standard.
And your question is, which theme is better?
Right.
And the answer is, neither theme is better given that set of criteria. Right?
Okay.
Given that it's a blog and that it's going to have a bunch of comments and that she's going to sell her services, there isn't a right answer to that question. Well, I think either one of those two choices is a good choice. Now, so then you're left with, okay, so do I want to learn how to do any customization using, code?
Mm-hmm.
And if the answer to that is yes, and I want this site to be absolutely unique, I don't want somebody to say, oh, that's a nice expression of that child theme, and I'm willing to go to the effort to do that, then Thesis is the right choice. However, if you want to do it quickly and easily, and you find a child theme that looks good and is a decent reflection of what your wife's business model is, and you don't care whether or not it's absolutely unique or not, but you want it to be a simple recipe for getting it accomplished, then I think the Genesis is the right choice. But the fact that it's a blog and the fact that it has lots of comments is irrelevant, because neither of those things are being handled specifically by Thesis or Genesis. That stuff is handled by WordPress. And
okay.
Thesis and Genesis are just going to determine, what it looks like when it's there.
Okay. Now, when you say have to learn some coding, what can you be a little more specific about that? What type of coding, and I mean, how much, would I have to learn?
Well, the challenge is, you learn from none, to a lot, depending upon what you want to accomplish. Okay. And if you I see this in new people all the time, where they say, okay, well, I like this, except I want to do this one little thing differently. And that one little thing that they want to do differently requires a ton of knowledge and code. It makes the most sense to be willing to live with a one little thing not quite the right way, unless you plan on becoming a coder. And so if you can sort of discipline yourself that way and say, I'm going to accept good enough. I'm going to say that, I'm willing to learn how to use a plugin to style the site. So you could use one of my plugins. And that in and of itself is a learning process. Right? It's a trial and error process of figuring out what different things do what. And if I really have to, I'll add a little bit of CSS or a little bit of PHP to the site to make it do something particularly special. But otherwise, I'm going to live with within the limitations of my knowledge and the existing ability of the theme, then, the only thing you have to learn is how to use some plugins and a little bit of CSS, maybe a little bit of HTML, maybe a little bit of PHP, and it's not a lot. But if you have a very complicated design, say you hired a designer, which I recommend you do, you hired a designer to come up with a design concept for you, and it's a very complicated one. It could be that, that in order for you to execute that design, you're going to need to learn a lot of code in order to do it. And it's just, you're in complete control in that, because you can decide whether or not to live within the limitations of what the tools that you're using can do or not.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're really disinclined to learning code, my recommendation would be to look at some of my videos on my plugins to see whether or not the plugins might accomplish what you want, and then Thesis could be a good choice. And also go look at Genesis and look at the Genesis child themes and see if there's anything there that is close to what you want to accomplish, and then that would be a good choice.
Okay. As far as learning some coding, some minimal or whatever, do you have any recommendations?
Well, what do you mean?
Where to go and
Well, my recommendation is to go to me, right? I mean, that's what we do here, is teach people how to customize customize the appearance and the functionality of their site. And if you want to learn how to customize the appearance of Thesis, then you start with the Customized Thesis Like a Pro series at the very beginning, and just start working your way through it. I mean, the reason why My Business exists is because there's no other good source of sort of very specific knowledge about how to do this. Right? You can go to lynda.com and you can watch their videos on how to create a WordPress theme, but much of the content of that is old, and none of that content is relevant to either Thesis or Genesis. And so when you use my site, you are embracing a system that includes either Thesis or Genesis, and then that narrows the range of things you have to learn. And probably the hardest way to do it is to start with just a plain vanilla PHP course or a plain vanilla CSS course, because actually the PHP and the CSS that you need to learn is related to WordPress and or Thesis or Genesis, and that's a much smaller world. It's a much smaller subset of things that need to be learned. Right? You don't need to learn everything there is to know about CSS in order to customize your site using CSS, because most of the CSS is already being handled for you. You only need to learn a little bit, the little piece that customizes the one thing you want to customize.
Okay. Okay, and you have videos on that then?
I have hundreds.
Like the introduction?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The Customized Thesis Like a Pro is the introductory series to customizing using code, and that's where I would start. It doesn't apply to Genesis. There are concepts there that'll be similar to Genesis, but Customized Thesis Like a Pro is based on using the Thesis system for customizing, and so it's not going to be effective customization information for Genesis. It's good background information, but it's not specific to Genesis. It's specific to Thesis.
Okay. Very good.
But,
Okay. Thank you for your help.
You're absolutely welcome. Glad to help.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Who else? Fran asks, does Shop work with Genesis? Or, I don't know for sure, Fran. I don't know if... actually, I'm going to unmute your microphone here, Fran. Hey, Fran. You still with me?
Hi, Rick.
Hey.
I am.
I don't know. I haven't had a chance to try to use Genesis with Shop.
Okay. I Googled around a little bit during the seminar there, and I didn't see a lot of evidence of it, but I did see that there was a question answered that said that there is some e-commerce that will work with Genesis. So I think
Oh, well,
Maybe I got a little
sure.
bit of the
There are a
answer.
couple of, I mean, if you want to use Genesis, there are a couple of e-commerce platforms that I know do work with Genesis comfortably. In the first place, I'm sure WP eStore works just fine with Genesis because Genesis has a very similar system to Thesis in terms of templating. And so it doesn't have the same kinds of issues that many other e-commerce plugins have with Thesis. And so I'm sure WP eStore works just fine with Genesis. The latest version of Shop, Shop 1.2.1, was specifically designed to accommodate both Thesis and Genesis, right? That's what they said, right? The templating system that Thesis and Genesis use.
Mm-hmm.
And so theoretically, Shop should work. Cart 66 is a cart that there is a child theme for. And while I've never used Cart 66, it does look actually like a pretty good shopping cart. It's a pretty full-featured and powerful shopping cart. It doesn't have the same kind of customization that you could do in Shop, but it looks to me like there is at least a theme designed for Cart 66 and Genesis. And then Genesis has a plugin called the WooCommerce Connect plugin that essentially bridges the gap between Genesis and WooCommerce. So WooCommerce is supposed to work just fine on Genesis.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's what I know about e-commerce and Genesis. I haven't actually tried any of them, but what I know about WP eStore suggests it should work fine. Genesis, they say, works, although I haven't tried it. And then the other two have things specifically designed in Genesis to work with, so I'm guessing they work fine too.
Okay. Well, just kind of looking at it, I probably would stick with what I have and the work we've done with Shop inside of Thesis. But perhaps for me, considering using one of these Genesis with a child theme to maybe showcase a product that you want it to have kind of its own dedicated site, and then if they wanted to buy, I could point it back to the other site, correct?
Yeah, although unless you've found a child theme that looks exactly the way you want it to look, I don't see the benefit in switching.
Yeah, just kind of keep it all inside the same site.
Well, no, not keep inside the same site. Keep using Thesis.
Right.
For you, I don't see any benefit to not using Thesis.
Right.
Unless
I think so too.
Unless there is a child theme that's sitting there right now that looks exactly the way you want it to look.
You know, the only thing I was intrigued by is the responsiveness. You know, so many. You know, you hear that. You know, in a couple years, that mobile searches are going to take over desktop searches. So anything about the reactive, I'm curious to hear about. But that theme you talked about from, what was it, My Remedy or something like that?
Themedy, Themedy, Themedy.
Yeah.
The reactive child theme. Yeah.
Yeah, but that would lay over the top of Thesis, and once again, am I getting rid of my existing look by bringing that theme in?
Of course. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's the fundamental in the child theme thing. Now, however, you know, in time, my plugins will be responsive. They're not responsive now, right? Your site is created by using a bunch of my plugins. In time, my plugins will be responsive. And I may even create a plugin that simply adds responsive stuff to Thesis that makes sort of a generic Thesis site, you know, generically responsive.
Yeah, but that'd be fantastic. Yeah. Can you have that ready next week?
Yeah, you bet. I probably actually have to successfully create a responsive child theme for Thesis first, which is what I'm working on right now.
No, I understand.
But
so but I enjoyed it anyway, and anything about that responsive, I'm always interested in listening to.
Sure. Well, that class starts on May 10th, and you may find that changing the design that I'm doing for that to your design is very easy.
Okay, so I'll probably tune in.
Okay.
All right, thanks a lot, Rick.
You betcha. Have a good day, friend. Okay, let's see. Gloria, I'm going to unmute your microphone here for a second if you're still here. Good morning, Gloria. I've just unmuted your microphone. Are you with me, Gloria? I just wanted to make sure that I answered your question well enough, that I explained what a child theme was well enough. I'm going to leave your microphone unmuted here for just a second, just to see if you jump in. Okay, I'll come back to you one more time here. Now going to go to Kim. Good morning, Kim.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. So you asked a question about graphics?
Oh, no, I didn't ask a question. I was just commenting because somebody had said, is it easy to make that responsive? And I was just commenting that when I did a responsive, when we were playing around with the responsive, that we had to remake all the graphics, remember?
Right.
So, I mean, it does require that kind of thoughtfulness when you're making this responsive. Is that not correct?
It is. It's a lot more complicated in that regard, right? I wrote a plugin for Genesis. The one thing Genesis doesn't do is it doesn't have responsive header images. So I wrote a plugin for Genesis that you see on this demonstration site that swaps out the header image. So you can see that when it, at its full size, the menu is on the right and the logo is on the left. But once it gets to a certain place, the menu drops down below, and now the header image, gets different. And then when it gets to a certain size again, the header image changes again, and then you get down to another site, and then the header image changes again. And what the result of that is that we've really got 4 different header images, being used on this site, a different one for each condition. Now, that's not the case for example, for the slider. Right, this slider uses the same image every time and just adjusts to the window size. And the same thing is true with these images here. And so there is a way in which, you don't have to come up with a bunch of different images. But it's true that you have to be thoughtful when you're thinking about a responsive design. On the one hand, the design needs to be simpler, right? You can't have lots of complicated things be responsive nicely. So you have to sort of simplify your target. And then while it's simpler, you have to understand that you have to consider, what the graphics are in different conditions. And so you do.
And most of us have those graphic images as our headers, or at least it's part of the header. And that's what I was just saying, that you do have to, like you were saying, you do have to kind of, because I only know that because I learned that from you. You have to kind of think about how that's going to look in a smaller environment.
Right.
Kind of figure that out. And how many sizes did we do? 3 or 4?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my comment.
Well,
that's all.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Good morning.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, we're going to go back to Gloria one more time just to make sure that I got that question. Gloria, I've just unmuted your microphone again. Just kind of hoping you're there. I know that sometimes people don't actually have microphones, so that doesn't work. But okay. Well, so hopefully I answered your question about child themes and how child themes relate to regular themes. And if not, look tomorrow for the videos that I recorded last night about it, because I do have a little presentation that's a little bit more long, a little more specific to it. And with that, I think I've answered all the questions that there are. Let me just look down here one more time. Oh, let's see. Somebody asked which theme, Genesis or Thesis, is best for generation of leads for freelance programming business. And again, the answer to that is neither of them. Really, although if you're a freelance programmer, you have really the choice of which platform you want to develop on. And in fact, as a programmer, you might choose to develop on both of them. But neither of them have characteristics that set them apart from the other for that kind of a website. And as a programmer, you're not going to use the same judgment about ease of setup and that kind of stuff because you're already a programmer. So at that point, it's just going to be the preference on the tools that you use and the systems that you want to use. Let's see, somebody else asked what's best for online stores and membership sites. And again, neither of them is best for that. Really, the question is, to what extent really you need your site to be unique, and to what extent you want to learn to customize. And that's really the trade-off between the two of them for that kind of a situation. Otherwise, if you're already committed to WooCommerce, then naturally Genesis is the right one to use. But if you're using Shop or WP eStore, my site has more videos about how to use it with Thesis, but I don't think one is better than the other necessarily. I guess that's pretty much it. I think that's answered all the questions that people submitted and all the questions that people have asked here throughout the session. So we're going to go ahead and call it a day. We have this series that I am teaching right now on how to create a professional website using WordPress and Genesis, and the site we're creating is this one here. And so I'm going to teach you everything that you need to know in order to create this kind of a WordPress site. And then the site that I'm working on right now, that worked a lot better yesterday before I started making some tweaks, but the Thesis responsive child theme based on the Blue Masters theme. This is the class that I will be teaching here starting May 10th, and this is in its infancy really, but again it's how to create a responsive child theme in Thesis. And this was responsive when I quit working on it a couple of days ago, but it stopped being responsive, so obviously a tweak I made is interfering with that. But nevertheless, on May 10th we'll be starting this class and learning how to do that kind of stuff together. So I'll be back again tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon with live question and answer sessions, and then again on Thursday morning with live Q&A, and then we'll be back next Monday night with a live class on creating a professional website using Genesis. Thank you very much everybody for joining. I hope you all got a benefit out of this, and if you did get some benefit out of it, find something on my site you like and like it on Facebook, or plus one on Google Plus, or tell somebody about it or something, link to it from your site, do something that will help us greatly. Everybody have a great day. Bye-bye.